I came here to Barrancabermeja, Colombia today to talk to you. We are now just a few days after the extraction, if you will, of Nicolás Maduro by special forces, by U.S. special forces in Venezuela, neighboring Venezuela. And I wanted to come to Barrancabermeja because here is where Colombia's largest refinery is, which you can see behind me in the distance. Owned by Ecopetrol, which trades on the New York Stock Exchange as EC. It is a state-controlled oil company. About 80% roughly of the shares are owned by the Colombian government. The rest trade publicly on both the New York Stock Exchange as well as the BVC, the Colombian Stock Exchange, the Bolsa de Valores de Colombia. But there's three quick things I want to touch on right now. One is that so far, like I keep saying, we have to see what happens next, then what happens, right? That's the most important question. So at this point, and it's still early, it looks like the same regime remains firmly in control in Caracas. Maduro was taken out, but a lot of people would have opined that he was never really the intellectual leader of that regime anyway, in the way that his predecessor Hugo Chavez was. Maduro was kind of appointed by Chavez to take over, but there is an infrastructure of people around him. The Cartel de Soles, the military generals, they call it that because, well, a cartel is a cartel. The Soles for the stars. Soles means sons. S-U-N-S, not sons like hijos or like your kids. But for the cartel of generals and admirals and high-ranking officials that surround Maduro and keep the regime functioning. Diosdado Cabello, the defense minister, is still in charge. Delcy Rodriguez, who has up until now been the executive vice president, that's their term, and I believe the oil minister also, she came up through the ranks from the Chavez days and is a hardcore, true believer, true socialist in the, I don't know, Stalin or Trotsky mode, not in like the welfare state, Macron or, left-wing German mode. Well, maybe far left German, I don't know. But she's still in control. They keep paying lip service to demanding the return of Maduro. They know that's not going to happen. They're not stupid people. But so far, the same regime is in power, and if that remains to be the case, that would mark a failure for Trump and his goals, because it's not like you had this strongman dictator like, I don't know, like a Saddam Hussein, and the people around him are so afraid of him that they're scared to speak up or anything like that. No, these are people who are very committed. I don't mean in any kind of idealistic sense, but in a kind of, they've got to keep this thing going for their own survival and well-being. So far, Maduro's been taken out, but the regime itself seems to be alive and well. Now, it's very early, we can see what happens, but if things continue as it is, then I don't think it could be considered a success, simply removing Maduro when the same oppressive regime in Venezuela remains in power. Again, it's early, not even a week has passed by, so we'll see what happens. I don't want to sound, in any case, not just right now, either too optimistic or too pessimistic, but really observing what's going on and sharing that analysis with you. Beyond that, and something that I haven't heard a lot of people talk about, is nobody is celebrating this more, well, perhaps the Venezuelan people who have been oppressed. And as you can see, they are overwhelmingly happy about this. But there are people who are direct benefits or participants in the regime who maybe are not happy that their gravy train is going away. But most of the Venezuelan, especially the exile community, but even people within Venezuela who are not necessarily affiliated or directly benefiting from the regime, are happy as well. Now, but like I was going to say, the country of Guyana. So right now we're in Colombia. Then next to Colombia, if we go east of here, you come into Venezuela, and then you go into Guyana. Now, in recent years, Nicolás Maduro has been threatening Guyana because Guyana's oil fields, there's a lot of land that is not just oil rich but mineral rich. Guyana found a historic petroleum find off their coast that's made the country of 800,000 go from maybe the poorest country in South America per capita to the richest country per capita. It's really a boom for that country. Hopefully they manage it well. But Venezuela under Maduro has had his eyes on it and started to kind of bully Guyana and say, hey, that's our land. There was an old treaty from the 1800s and where the current border was agreed upon. And Maduro has been saying that border is null and void. All this land, it's really jungle land off the Orinoco, near the Orinoco Cuenca, the Orinoco watershed. It's funny because sometimes I forget the word in English. The Cuenca, a Cuenca is a watershed. But they are certainly happy, the people in Guyana, because this relieves some pressure off of them because of the military threat that Venezuela, the Venezuelan regime, has been making against Guyana. And people, this is not something it's in kind of specialty news and things like that if you cover South America or cover the petroleum industry or something like that. But a lot of people have not been talking about the threats of armed aggression that Venezuela under Maduro has been making to take over about a third of Guyana. So that's an important factor here. Aside from that, I came to Barrancabermeja because I wanted to talk about the oil factor. A lot of people are saying, well, Trump must want the Venezuelan oil. If he did, this would be a dumb way to get it because you could just buy it. If you wanted the oil, you just lift the sanction and just buy the oil. We're here in Colombia. Colombia typically is an oil exporting country. Under the current regime of Gustavo Petro, or not regime, I mean, it's a democracy here. He got elected. The country has not been producing enough petroleum to keep up with its own domestic needs. Petro, the current president who will be gone this year, we're in election season here in Colombia now, and so the elections are going to be in May, and if there's a runoff election, it'll be in June. We'll know who the president is going to be, and that person will take power in the summer. But the current president, Gustavo Petro, is an anti-petroleum president, which is kind of funny because his name is Petro, right? But he has not allowed the country to drill for new petroleum or to set up new petroleum sources and wells domestically at a rate to simply replace the country's own consumption needs, let alone export. So now Colombia, which has a bunch of natural gas in the ground, has become a net importer of natural gas and has to bring in gas. And that's caused a rise in the domestic prices because obviously imported gas is more expensive. It has to be shipped here, things like that. But if you want the petroleum, just buy it. Now, Venezuela has a very poor quality petroleum. There's a lot of it in the ground, but it's viscous. It's basically tar, brea. And it's so thick you can't just pump it up through pipes like regular petroleum like you'd see in a place like Texas or Alaska or Saudi Arabia or Pennsylvania or Ohio or here in Colombia. This stuff is tar, and you've got to actually import solvents like xylene and light hydrocarbons, pump it down into the ground, mix it with the heavy crude, like they call it, to then get it liquid enough where you can even bring it back up and refine it or ship it or whatever you're going to do with it. That aside from the point, meaning that it's a low quality, low demand crude, I'm skeptical of the claims that this is all about oil because there are easier ways to get at the oil. The U.S. is now pretty much petroleum independent. It just doesn't need Venezuelan oil. And if it needed to import oil, there's a lot better oil to import than Venezuelan oils. The refiners would rather have light, when you hear people talk about light sweet crude, what they mean, it's not sweet like if you taste it, but meaning the quality of it. It doesn't have a lot of sulfur and other types of things that make it burn poorly or harder to refine and that kind of thing. It's a high quality, light liquid, not light in color, but light in viscosity. Easy to pump, easy to refine, and has a lot of the the lighter hydrocarbons that are higher value as compared to, let's say, a bunch of asphalt, which is a petroleum product, or bunker oil or something like that. So that being the case, I do think that there might be something to, if not so much, it's not that the U.S. needs that oil, but the U.S. might want to, or the Trump administration more specifically, might want to prevent countries like China from getting it. Things like this, as we know, these tankers were coming to Venezuela, going to places like China, maybe India, some other places like that. And this actually, as we saw the day after the extraction of Maduro, these tankers out there in the Atlantic Ocean turning around because they knew that they weren't going to get the oil. So I don't think even the petroleum aspect is not so much that the U.S. wants the petroleum, but the U.S. might want to block other strategic opponents or enemies or countries that Trump is pissed off with, maybe for good reason. I'm not saying that in like a sarcastic way, but it may be more about keeping those countries from getting the petroleum and funding the Maduro regime. That's another important part of it too. The oil exports from Venezuela bring in hard currency to the country, and also allow Venezuela to continue to collaborate and support countries like Cuba. So it's not so much the U.S. wants to get their hands on the oil. I'm really skeptical about that. The U.S. wanting to, or the Trump administration wanting to keep other, let's say, strategic competitors, if not opponents or even enemies, from getting their hands on it and from funding the Maduro regime would be a lot more plausible. Those are the 3 quick points I wanted to make today here in Barrancabermeja, lovely little city. I mean, it's not really so much a tourist spot, but this is a kind of like the petroleum capital. Behind me is actually the Jesus Petrolero, or the Petroleum Jesus. I'm not making this up. That's what the statue behind me is called. Where I am, in the little like Malecon. This is not the main Magdalena River. It's kind of over there, behind, like over by the refinery. I'm probably about a mile away from the refinery. But the largest river in Colombia, and that's actually the river where the hippopotamus are, and there's crocodiles and all kind of stuff in it. But anyway, wanted to bring this to you really quickly here from Barrancabermeja in Santander, on the border across the Magdalena River from Antioquia, and I'll check in with you soon. Thanks.